And the news breaking earlier today about that legal Hail Mary from Donald Trump on the eve of the first ever criminal trial of an American ex-president. That trial set to start in just over 1 week. It is truly the case that has it all. A porn star named Stormy, a witness named Hope, plenty of fake names for good measure, a tabloid cover-up, and a former fixer turned star witness. Overseeing this uniquely Trumpian circus turned criminal trial, Judge Juan Merchan. He's a judge with a no-nonsense reputation. About him, the New York Times writes this, quote, in Justice Merchan's 17 years on the bench, 13 as presiding judge in the mental health court he created, he has had his share of unusual cases. There was a murder trial involving a supposed curse on the defendant, the daredevils who jumped off the World Trade Center in parachutes, and a so-called soccer mom, madam, accused of running a high-end brothel from the Upper East Side. None of those defendants challenged the judge quite like Trump, who for decades has navigated around law enforcement scrutiny. As we have reported on this broadcast, Trump has repeatedly attacked the judge's daughter. On that, the Times reports this, quote, two people close to Justice Merchan said that the judge had privately expressed pain over the attacks on his daughter, but the people said that those attacks will not compromise his ability to oversee the case. While Trump is under an expanded gag order that's supposed to prevent him from going after the judge's family and the family of Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg, his attorneys have brought up Merchan's daughter in yet another last-minute bid to derail this trial. They're asking once again for the judge to recuse himself, in part over his daughter's work in Democratic politics. Prosecutors this morning firing back in a filing against Merchan to reject this recusal motion, saying this, quote, the defendant's motion is not a good faith effort to identify legitimate grounds for this court's recusal. Instead, this motion is no more than an effort to end-run the order restricting extrajudicial speech and pollute the court file with ad hominem attacks against the court and the court's family as part of a meritless effort to call the integrity of these proceedings into question. The DA adding that this is all part of Trump's strategy, one that he has used in all four of the criminal cases against him, that is to delegitimize the entire process and do whatever it takes to prevent a trial from ever starting. That throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks strategy also appears to include an attempt to move the trial. A source telling NBC News that Trump's attorneys have filed a motion to change the venue of this trial. They're also requesting a stay on the gag order on Trump. The Manhattan DA declined to comment to NBC News. A desperate Donald Trump trying anything and everything to stop the hush money case from going to trial in 7 days is where we start today with some of our most favorite reporters and friends. With me at the table, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin's here. Also joining us, former top official at the Department of Justice and MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissman's here, and former senator and co-host of MSNBC's How to Win 2024 podcast, Claire McCaskill's here. Lisa, we were both just down from the roof deck where we got to peek in our glasses at the eclipse. There's no Trump parallel to the eclipse. It's just neat that that also happened. This is probably the most unsurprising twist to the Trump story, but it is a sign of how much he fears these proceedings.
It absolutely is. And Nicole, I want to I share what you're saying on one hand, and on the other, I want to underscore how unusual what Trump did today is from a legal perspective. We expected this week to be nutty, right? I have told people here, buckle up. He is going to try any number of last-minute legal maneuvers, including ones that are procedurally atypical. That's exactly what happened here today. The type of proceeding that he's filed is called an Article 78 proceeding. It's a way in New York for suing a governmental actor directly for things that are unlawful or unconstitutional. The bar to meet that threshold is a very high one, and Trump knows that because he's tried this exact move before with Justice Arthur Engoron, who proceeded over the civil fraud trial. There, he was contesting the gag order in that case and some sanctions that resulted therefrom. He got a 2-week stay of the gag order in that case. But I want to make sure our viewers understand what he didn't get there was any pause in that trial, which was already ongoing.
So even if he knows he'll lose, he seems to never shy away from these unconventional, if you will, long shot tactics. Is there a chance that he could succeed in slowing the start date? Or do you think that from what you've seen from Judge Merchan, we're full steam ahead in a week?
Well, I think what we've seen from Judge Merchan is that he wants to go full steam ahead. But of course, he's not the decision maker here. In all likelihood, Trump is asking a single judge of the appellate division right now, as we speak. There's a hearing going on that NBC News' Adam Reese is covering. He's probably asking them, stay the trial while a full panel of appellate judges can determine these motions. In fact, I think Trump is saying right now in court, and I want to share with you some of Adam's reporting, is that the media attention here is so overwhelming and the pretrial publicity stands alone, such that not only is an adjournment necessary, but also New York County is an inappropriate place to try this case. He has said that before, but he has never particularly asked for a change of venue. Now he's asking for both. Pause the proceedings and, when they resume, take it outside the County of Manhattan.
Andrew Weissmann, your sense on, one, whether he'll have any success on the legal front, and two, how much further strain this places on the system?
So getting to the legal merits, the argument that pretrial publicity is a reason to delay this case is one that, as we say in New York, is pure chutzpah. Remember, part of the reason that there is such enormous publicity is because of Donald Trump himself. You don't get to open your mouth repeatedly about the case and then say, I can't have a trial because I'm speaking so much about the case with a large megaphone. That argument would have some merit if there was any prospect that, but for his statements, that there would be a diminution in public interest in the case in the months ahead. But of course, that's not the case. So the answer to pretrial publicity concerns is jury selection. You have a very careful process for jury selection. The argument for change of venue is one that is a sure dead loser. The leading case on that is one I argued, which is United States versus Jeff Skilling, who is the head of Enron. And what the Supreme Court said there is, when you've got a case of such notoriety that everywhere you go in the United States, people are going to hear about it, the idea that you need to transfer the case makes no sense. Again, the remedy is having a very careful jury selection process. So neither of these motions, it has merit to it. I'd be very surprised if this put the trial off. It does, to your point, Nicole, though, really signal how much Donald Trump does not want the public to see the facts at a trial. Remember, he has already been given all of the evidence, all of the witness statements of what they're going to say, everything they've said in the grand jury, everything they've told to the district attorney's office. He has all of that. So he's very aware. There are no surprises as to what the evidence is, and he does not want that evidence to come out. That's like the big picture here is, if he is so innocent, if this is such a witch hunt, why is he doing everything to avoid clearing his name? That is what, remember, the trial is one where the government has the burden. The government has to reach the highest standard that we have in the law, proof beyond a reasonable doubt to a unanimous jury. And the state is the one that's asking for this trial and for it to go forward. And the defendant is doing everything, kicking and screaming, to make sure that the public does not get to see the facts.
I mean, Andrew, to that point, here's what he knows. Here's who he knows will come out and make the case against him. This is from our friends at ABC News. Quote, to try to prove their criminal hush money case against former President Trump, prosecutors in New York are expected to rely on several witnesses who are or were part of Trump's inner circle, including his longtime assistant, Rona Graff, his former director of Oval Office operations, Madeleine Westerhout, and longtime trusted aide, Hope Hicks. The sources said prosecutors with the Manhattan DA's office are also expected to call Deborah Tarasoff, who worked in the Trump Org's accounting department, Jeffrey McConney, the Trump Org's former controller, as well as Trump's former attorney and so-called fixer, Michael Cohen. The sources also said both Daniels and McDougal, Karen McDougal, a former Playboy model who received a $150,000 payment from AMI for rights to her story about an alleged affair with Trump, are also expected to testify. at trial. I'm beyond thinking, Andrew, that there's anything that impacts him politically. So the freakout is all about what these witnesses threaten legally and criminally.
Yeah, Nicole, when you mention all of those names, what do they all have in common? They're all Trump loyalists. They're all Trump insiders. These were all people who worked for Donald Trump year in and year out. Michael Cohen was his fixer. A lot of these people are back office people. It reminds me so much of the January 6th committee hearings where that case was made. The presentation was people inside the Trump administration talking about what they saw. So I do think that this is one where it remains to be seen how the evidence comes in, but I think we're going to be seeing an enormous number of insiders giving damning evidence. And I also assume that there is a paper trail that is going to be, really compelling evidence. And I think that is the reason the state is trying everything it can to make sure it has its day in court. And although Donald Trump doesn't want it, they're trying to make sure he has his day in court.
Hey, everyone. MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.